what that means.
So I was on the road, right? It was 2 in the morning. I was driving back to my house or my apartment from Springfield.
Okay.
And it is dark, and I didn't have my brights on. 1, first mistake. 2, I was going a little quick. Not unreasonably fast, but a little over the speed limit. And then I come over a hill, and at the right there are 3 donkeys on the road. Donkeys. What? I think they must have escaped from a farm and gotten on the road. But they were actually, because I saw them, and this is there's deer on the road.
Right.
Deer in the headlights, they're not going to move, so I can just because
Right.
they were in the other lane that I was in, on the is a 1-lane highway or 2-lane
1-lane highway.
2-lane highway, and they're in the other lane. And I'm like, oh, I'll be fine. And then I was like, oh, these deer aren't gonna go into the moving car because they'll freeze with the headlights. And then these donkeys freaking start moving into the road. And I was like, I'm gonna just hit this donkey because I can't stop in time. I'm just gonna hit him, but I narrowly swerved in between 2 donkeys.
Oh my gosh!
It was weird. it was a weird.
I was expecting to find out what hit some donkeys meant.
No. It was actually donkeys on the road.
Wow.
Isn't that just? Where do you see that?
I
don't know.
even. I hesitate to name a place, for fear of insulting someone.
I don't even know, dude. All right, with that, welcome to the Fair Winds podcast, everybody. That was our banter. So I was recording.
It's a lot cooler now that you've announced that was the banter.
Yeah, I know, right? Now I tell people what we're doing. I can just edit this out. It's fine.
You could, but then they would miss the donkeys.
No, I'll keep that in, but I'll edit the thing where I said this is the banner.
Oh,
What are we talking about?
then this whole conversation doesn't make sense.
I'll edit it out.
There's a lot going on. How much editing are you gonna do?
Probably not.
Yeah, I didn't think you were that dedicated.
Hey. All right, Mike, what are we talking about today?
Oh, we're just jumping into it.
Yeah, well, what do you mean we're just jumping into it?
Well, I don't know. Is this going to be one of those podcasts where there's 20 minutes of banter and then 2 minutes of content, and then it's whoa, commercial break?
I don't know about that. I mean, might as well just jump into it.
Sponsor today is League of Legends.
No. I do play League of Legends.
Do you? I've never played it.
It's fun.
But I have taken many students' phones away while they were playing it in study hall.
They're playing it in study. Oh, yeah, I know, because the phone game's so bad. It's not even fun. Dude, of all the games to be,
they'll do anything
on your phone.
They'll do anything but homework.
Well, yeah. No, I was a high school student.
Including play League of Legends on their phone.
No, for me it was D&D books because it looks enough like homework that nobody's gonna stop me. That or KOTOR. I played a lot of KOTOR in class.
Interesting.
Hey man, it was free for a little bit on the Apple Store, or I got it for free, and it was a pretty good game. So
excellent. I didn't know there was an Apple Store, an app on an iPad.
It was they released an app version of KOTOR.
Ooh.
Yeah, but not the second one. Although the second one's not as good. So
yeah, there's cool stuff in the second one, but the first the first one's got some good stuff in it.
Well, I don't think the second one wasn't as rigorously developed. You can tell it seemed a bit rushed compared to the first one.
I played it, so I don't know if I would have been able to tell then.
There's just some stuff that goes nowhere. We're oh, this could have been cool if they added
That's
a little
fair.
bit
The
more.
first one really tidies up,
and then it just ends.
Yes,
it just
true.
ends. I was so they didn't know what they were going to, well, not that they didn't know, they didn't have time for what they were going to do, and they just ended it, is what I ended up walking away.
The Planet Malachor 5 is such a letdown.
Yeah.
It is walk through some green lightning for a minute, and then it's you've made it to the Trey's Academy. It's oh, well, that wasn't much. We've talked this planet up for days of gameplay, and now we're here for a minute.
Yep. All right, Mike. Ancient Greeks.
Yeah. So
who were they?
So we talked about we're doing our back to backs. What do you want to call that? Our
I don't know, just the month kind of. I don't know.
and
Having a
we've
theme for the month.
right,
kind
and
of thing.
we're already breaking that by
Are we?
having a 2-month long theme.
That's fine.
Our second theme is already breaking the mold. We are innovators.
This is literally
Innovators.
I don't know about innovators or just hey, we should do this in. Okay, but like
We should have a monthly theme, but like, should we?
yeah, that's
Let's
exactly what it is.
deconstruct that idea. No, I think it's good to have this theme. I think that's good, and I think we'll pick it back up in 2 months. We'll do that whole
Ayo,
monthly theme
yep.
thing. But I thought these would be important things to talk about. So what we're going to talk about is what I sometimes refer to as the 4 first dialogues of Plato.
Mm-hmm.
Not because I think he wrote them first, not because I think he intended them to be read first, but because Bernard Suzanne thinks both of those things. Actually, I shouldn't misrepresent him. I don't think Bernard Suzanne thinks Plato wrote these 4 first. He does legitimately say that he is convinced that the schema for reading the dialogues that he has come up with is what he thinks Plato intended. Which, on the one hand, I'm like, good for you trying to figure out what the author intended.
Right.
And trying to be true to that. Good for you. You're really confident that you nailed
Well,
it.
especially because he didn't write this one. Maybe.
Especially because maybe he didn't write this one. Yes,
Like-
no, you're so right. You're
What?
so right. Bernard Suzanne has no question in his mind that Plato wrote this one.
Oh, really?
Oh, yeah. So, I mean, that's off the table.
That's
Alcibiades 2, he's like, Plato didn't write that one. And no one thinks Plato wrote that one.
Is it good though?
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
Cool.
Anything that was ever written that someone said, Plato wrote that, they're all good. No one ascribed bad things to Plato. To Plato's
sense.
credit, his
Yeah.
reputation was such that you knew you couldn't get away with saying, well, I found a stupid thing. Plato said that. Like,
Yeah.
that's not going to happen. But anyway, the first 4 have these names. The First Alcibiades, the Lysis, the Lachis, and the Charmides. Those are your first 4. So we're just going to do an episode on each of those 4.
Yeah, that's good. First Alcibiades. I just read it today.
Yes. Should I go into that, or should I tell you why Bernard Suzanne thinks these are the first 4?
Sure.
Okay. So Bernard Suzanne this is an idea that goes way, way back, the tetralogies, trying to split Plato into chunks of 4.
Why?
I'm so glad you asked, because that was what I was going to say next. In ancient Greece, the Dionysia, the city Dionysia, is the great festival where the tragedies were performed. That's what everyone knows about the Dionysia.
Okay.
And a playwright would submit 3 tragedies and a satyr play. And a satyr play is like a raunchy satirical comedy.
Okay.
Retelling of a myth, but like, I don't know, like a dirty comedian is telling it. And for whatever reason, they would 3 tragedies and then this other thing, this satyr play.
Like 6 seasons in the movie.
Yes. Yes, very much so. And so there was this attempt to say, well, we know Plato had been a playwright.
Okay.
He was a tragedian before he was a disciple of Socrates. And people, as early as the ancient Greeks, I forget the exact person who put forward this idea first. And I wish I could remember, because I just read about it last night again to refresh my memory, but I can't remember who put it out. He said Plato wrote in tetralogies, even his dialogues. It's 3 tragedies and a satyr play. And everyone was like, oh, you're right. And then spent the next 2,000 years fighting over which ones went with which ones and what the structure was.
Oh, wait a minute. So they were like,
that makes so
is-
much sense.
so-
And then had no idea what to do with it.
What?
But anyway, that's what Bernard Suzanne goes with, and he has built his. And what he says is, it's not 3 serious ones and a joke. It's each tetralogy has a theme, and within each tetralogy you have a topical one that introduces the main question, and then 3 that comment on it. And so what he proposes in the first tetralogy is that the whole point of it is the beginning. What is necessary to begin well the life of philosophy? And he says what you need to know is that philosophy is the point of life. Is that you as a human, your goal is to philosophize. Your goal is to be fully rational, to comprehend the forms, to come to know ultimate eternal reality. That's what separates you from anything else called animal, is that you alone among the animals comprehend eternity. And that's the Alcibiades one.
Yeah, that's
the
a
first
lot
Alcibiades.
of what it is. Yeah, that's a lot of what it says.
Basically, it's what are you doing with your life? What should you be doing with your life? And how are you going to do it? And then there's 3 more. And so the answer in the Alcibiades one, to spoil everything, the answer in the Alcibiades one is to become a philosophos aner, a wisdom-loving man. And so the next 3 dialogues are the Lysis, which asks, what does philo mean? What does it really mean? How do you get to philo? The Laches is aner. What does it mean to be a man? And then the Charmides is sophos. What does it mean to be wise? So a wisdom-loving man.
Okay.
And so each of those 3 ties into that. And so that's what the first tetralogy by Bernard Suzanne, that's what its goal is.
Right.
And so that's what we're doing our next 4 episodes on.
Hey. It's like we planned it.
Yeah.
Kind of. I mean, you planned it, so.
Yeah. And then like one day we'll do like the second tetralogy for 2 months. And then one day we'll do like the third tetralogy for 2 months. But that'll be a while.
Probably.
We don't want to bog this down as just
a...
Mike comments on Plato.
I mean, it's an interesting podcast idea, but...
It's great. It's what my YouTube channel is.
Oh, yeah?
Mm-hmm. I'm reading the Platonic dialogues in Bernard Suzanne's order and making videos about different themes. So I've pulled a lot of what I was going to say about Alcibiades one from my YouTube videos, which you should also check out.
What is your YouTube? Plug it.
Magister K.
Okay.
Means Mr. K in Latin.
Right.
I don't upload a lot. I only upload in the summers, which means my content is like weekly for 3 months.
That's fine.
And then sits there for 9 months.
All right. What are we talking about first?
One.
I've got some things.
Do you want to give your impressions? I would consider myself a philosophy teacher, since I am literally paid to teach philosophy. And so I'm interested in, like, I know what I think.
I have quotes that I like.
Excellent.
And there are
pulling out good quotes
that I don't like.
Excellent.
So, right off the bat, one of my favorite quotes, probably of the entire thing, is on the first 2 pages, where it says, my love Alcibiades, which I heartily like to confess, would long ago have passed away if I saw you loving your good things, or thinking you ought to pass in the enjoyment of them. Alcibiades, will you live as you are, or die in an instant if you are forbidden to make any further acquisitions? I verily believe that you would choose death. I was like, man, that's pretty intense, because it's like, if you have no goal, if you have no aim, and you are properly oriented, although Alcibiades later is what we see, but if you have no goal, it kind of posits that life really isn't worth living, which I find it compelling.
Yeah, should we let people know real quick the
probably
30-second plot?
Yeah.
Alcibiades is 18-ish years old.
He's 20.
Does it legitimately say that?
Yeah, he says 20.
Excellent. Alcibiades is exactly 20 years old. He is on his way to the Ecclesia. He's going to go talk to the leaders of Athens, the democracy, about war and about whether or not they should attack a certain people. Socrates is like a 60-something-year-old dude, and he has known Alcibiades for Alcibiades his whole life, kind of. He's like a family friend of everyone. He meets him on the road, and they start talking, and Socrates basically says, "Where are you going?"
Well,
and Alcibiades
Socrates follows him, doesn't he? Though. Because he talks about it. He's like, Socrates, you have followed me, but if at this point, if you weren't following me now and approaching me now, I would come and find you. So
I think that's Alcibiades talking about like throughout his life.
Oh, okay.
He keeps running into Socrates. I don't think Socrates is literally like following him right now. I think they run into each other. I mean, like maybe.
Oh.
But but I think that line is meant to be more going on. Could you read the first sentence?
Let's see. I dare say that you may be surprised to find, O son of Clonius,
I'll let you figure it out.
that I, who am your first lover, have not having spoken to you for many years, when the rest of the world were wearying you with their attentions, and the last of your lovers who still speaks to you.
Excellent. Cool. Just love the first lines of things.
Okay. No.
We'll talk more about that later.
Yeah, so, and then it starts out pretty good, because he's like, Alcibiades, you're basically wanting to rule Athens. What the heck are you doing?
Yes.
Alcibiades
will accept nothing less than total world domination.
Basically, is exactly what he says. He's like, you're going to rule Athens, and then you're just going to go over and convince other people to to let you rule them. And even if you're not, like, the king, you're basically the king.
Yeah.
So, and he's like, dude, you can't. Why? Like, you gotta think kind of about what you're doing and why you're doing it. Let's see, what else have I picked out? He has a bit about kind of like archetypes, kind of that I'd like to get into. Let's see. Knowledge is the root of good advising. Yes. I did like that.
Yeah, what does... so, he's talking to Alcibiades. He says, where are you literally going to right now? And he says, I'm going to the Ecclesia. I'm going to go give a speech.
Right, and then he's like...
About what?
Tell me. Kind of. He's like, let me guess. This is exactly what you're doing. I'm going to lay out step by step exactly what you're doing. And then he's like, no, that... basically, you got me.
You're going to go tell those people who they should fight and who they shouldn't fight.
Let's see.
And Alcibiades claims, to know these things.
Right.
Which is always dangerous.
Yeah, and Socrates does a good job at pestering him about, like, well, what? How do you know them?
How do you know them is such an important question to this
Which is good. Like, I like that.
Do you remember his answer? What are the two ways that you can come to knowledge about something?
You can come to knowledge about something by... discovering it yourself, which I thought was an interesting distinction, not like deciding it, but discovering it.
Exactly.
And then by being told or taught it by somebody else.
You can learn it from someone else, or you can discover it yourself. Those are the two options. And of course, if you discover it yourself, then you're the authority on it.
Right. Because you're the one who discovered it.
But of course, if you don't know it, you have two options. You can go discover it yourself, or you can learn from it. And how do you know who to learn from? Socrates gets into that.
Yeah, he does get into that.
Obviously, I mean, we have a word for the kind of person that gives knowledge.
Which is a teacher.
Yeah, we call them a teacher.
Right.
And he says, well, who was your teacher?
Right, and who's a good teacher?
And who is a good teacher? What are the qualities of a good teacher? What are the necessary qualities of a good teacher?
And then they get into just like, what are what do you need to do to like live a good life? Because that's where eventually Socrates ends up taking the conversation. He talks about why do you have the authority, not quote unquote, the actual just authority to advise the Athenians about what they're doing? Because he makes a very good point of, well, are you going to advise them on like how they're going to build boats? No, because you don't know how to build boats. Like you're like even a bad person at making boats is going to be way better than you are.
Who are 0% at making boats.
Yeah, like
even a bad person who has made a boat is better than you, who I've made no boats.
Exactly. And then they get into. That's pretty much it. Like, it's all just about how can they live the best life, and where does that going to take him? So I liked the first half.
Yes.
The second half, I have a couple disagreements with, but we can get into that later.
Let's exhaust our discussion of the first half.
So
I like what he goes with the teacher. I want to focus on that a little bit. What are the two necessary qualities of a teacher?
That they are convincing.
Nope.
Then
they don't have to be convincing. They have to have knowledge, and they have to have consensus. That's what Socrates says.
So they had to know things, and what they know has to
they must agree.
Has to be
in order to be a group of teachers, to have the authority to teach, they must know things and they must agree on them. So Socrates is saying, if at any point there is a group of people who might rightly be called experts, if there's something about which they don't agree, they cannot come to a consensus on it, they probably shouldn't teach it.
That's fair. Like I would.
Yeah, they should be very clear about the fact that we don't all agree on this yet. We are all still working on it. They're not authorities. They're not authoritative teachers on something in that way. Now, I think it's good to distinguish real, actual, professional disagreement and that weirdo who, like, if you have a bunch of experts on something and one of them's like the fringe weirdo who's like, nah, man, it's the aliens.
Right.
Okay, cool. Like whatever. But like real professional disagreement in a field means, okay, well, then the field just needs to be really clear about the fact that we don't actually know this.
Right. Like
we're working on it. Here's where we're at, but we're not teaching it to you as certain knowledge.
Mm-hmm. And that's where you get into, like, I don't know, for example, there's a lot of stuff in science, but when they were discovering the, like, DNA and sequencing the human genome, they didn't know. So they're not like, well, this is the human genome and this is how you sequence it. Or, like, I don't know, learning to fly is another, like, any discovery kind of thing is what I go to. Or, like, evolution. For a while, I said that poorly. Evolution, though, is was hotly debated. So, like,
yeah, the mechanism of it and things like that, and
right.
And different people have had, I think, differing degrees of the proper humility to say, look, this is something we don't actually know about this, and the humility to say, no, actually, we do know about this, and whether or not I like it, we're pretty certain on something. And both of those take humility. Both of those take the ability to say, I'm not the answer. I'm just trying to figure it out with everyone else. And if we don't have an answer, I need to be able to sit back and say we don't. But if we do have an answer, I need to be able to sit back and say that we do. I think both of those require humility.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, because you have to... Being able to admit when you're wrong is huge. Like, and that's kind of where... That's the other thing that Socrates kind of points out is that Alcibiades is wrong in a way that is not good. He actually calls it the least good. Or he doesn't... Alcibiades calls it the least good, but Socrates... I don't care.
You're right. No, you're
the
fine.
leading questions, whatever.
Yes. Socrates is at his most aggressive. Not the most aggressive, but he's fairly aggressive in this one.
Yeah. But he says that there are basically three states of knowledge, kind of. Mm-hmm. And it's, do you know it, and are you an authority on the subject? And are you... Perfect is kind of the right word, but kind of not too.
Sure. Certain.
Yeah, certain would probably be a good word. And then the second one is you don't know, and you know that you don't know. So you leave it to other people who do. Mm-hmm. And then he said the worst of those, and then the third one, the worst one is you don't know, but you don't realize that you don't know.
Yeah, you don't know, but you think you do.
Right. And that goes back to, what's the graph? The theorem. The one, it's not a real theorem, but it's like it says as you get into learning a subject, you start out thinking that you know more than you do.
You think you know, Learn as you come to know more, you realize how little you know. It seems to you like you know less.
Right.
Because you realize the vastness of what there is to know. And the more you know, the smaller a percentage you can realize of the fullness of it that there is.
Yeah, that's a good way.
Yes. I forget. Yeah,
I don't know what there's like a name
it.
for it, but I don't remember the name for it.
Yeah.
And we're going to get something. Somebody's going to come and try and beat me up about it.
I hope not. Yes, and what is the thing that Socrates says? Alcibiades, you claim to know this.
Justice.
Hold that in your head for all of Plato.
There is some stuff when they get into justice too that I don't know. I don't know if I agree about.
Sure.
But they talk about justice and what does it mean, and why? Because he talks about Socrates like, well, what are you going to advise the Athenians on, really? He's like, well, war, and then war and peace, and then kind of acting
to attack and who
that
not
one
to attack.
Right.
And he says, oh, and of course, deciding who to attack and who not to attack is fundamentally a question of justice.
Right. Just
and
war.
Alcibiades says, yeah.
And unjust war.
And of course, Socrates says, then you are an expert in justice, you claim. Because if you weren't an expert, you would not have the audacity to teach others.
Then he says something really creepy, where he's like, how are you an expert, Alcibiades? Because I watch you leave your house every day, and I didn't see you talking to anybody who knows anything about justice, so...
Yes.
How are you an
How
expert?
did you come to know this? Did you learn it from some other, or did you discover it yourself? Those being the two ways we agreed on earlier, that one comes to knowledge. Yeah. It's a well put together dialogue.
Yeah. It's just weird. It's a creepy line.
It's so good.
But it's fine. It's ancient Greek, baby. Yeah.
Yeah, so he's talking about Alcibiades like, well, you must be an expert in this. And what does Alcibiades claim?
He's like, yeah.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah, and then he's like, well, who did you learn from? Everybody. Kind of.
Yes, the many.
The many.
Literally the many, which is a jargon term.
Right, they.
Hoi polloi, in fact.
Or just, they taught me.
They, yes.
The
It's so good.
They.
Which, as good scholars of Plato, we also know who raises the charge against Socrates for which he is killed.
The eponymous them?
Yeah. They laid the charge. Like,
interesting.
Literally Miletus, but Socrates says, Miletus did not give you evidence against me. Because literally in 1 or 2 pages, Socrates destroys all of Miletus's arguments. And he's not even really being insincere. Miletus's arguments just suck.
Right.
He says, but I will never convince you all, because from the day you were in the cradle up till now, they have told you about me. And I can't argue with them. Because if you've heard it from some mysterious them, I can't address that accusation in court because it's anonymous. And so whenever we hear, where did you learn justice from? And Alcibiades says, the many. We should all go, oh, no.
Well, okay.
No.
So this is where I might disagree a little bit.
Sure, go for it.
Because Alcibiades brings up a good point. You learn the language around you from you learn the language, which is, I thought it was a really good point. I was like,
it's an excellent argument.
Heck yeah. And then,
nothing could be more important than the Greek language, according to Alcibiades, and Socrates agrees.
And then, like, the other thing that is Socrates kind of talks about, well, like, how can they teach them? Like, how can the many teach the many?
Yes. I find that to be part of the weaker argument against Alcibiades, but you're right. There are weak arguments.
And then I was just like, well, here's the other thing is the way, maybe it's just the way I see things, which sounds really dumb when I say that out loud.
Go for it.
But there is, I kind of am compelled by the whole kind of Freudian idea of spirits You know what I mean? Or archetypes is another one. That's a good one.
Okay, I was like, I try never to listen to Freud.
Okay, but here's an idea where like you have different spirits that possess you, or another way to think about it is different kind of like archetypes could possess you, or something like that. But the best example I can think of off the top of my head is because I listen to Jordan B. Peterson podcast. Listen to
You're
it
right,
too.
yeah.
And he was talking about it, where you have say a dad, or say a kid is playing house, right?
Yeah.
And they don't know what it means to play dad right away, and they don't necessarily always mimic their own dad.
Sure.
But they can see moments where their dad is being the dad.
Sure.
And moments where he is being just himself, just a normal person. So you have moments in your life where you exemplify the archetype of the father, right? Mm-hmm. And it's not necessarily, you might not necessarily have like authority on it, because a lot of times, like, again, parenting is another good thing where you don't know really how to parent.
I think I follow.
But when you correctly embody that archetype, you accurately teach how to be a father, even if you might stumble into that archetype, or be possessed by the spirit of the father, instead of like articulating it and actually formally discovering it.
Right.
In a scientific
there's moments
way.
where, in a sense, you step outside of yourself and you realize it's not me that did that. Something kind of took over, and just like I was there and I was doing it, but something else was doing it through me.
Exactly. So I could see a compelling argument for I was taught by society the ways of justice, because you can observe people, and of observing different ways of action, you can extract an archetype from that.
Sure. Yeah.
So
and
that's,
I mean,
that's
you're describing Platonism.
Oh, really?
Yeah. That's the forms. Replace the word archetypes with forms.
Yeah.
And that's Platonism. The idea that there are realities, and they are bigger than you, and they can take you over if they want, because you are smaller than them, and you will always be exemplifying them well or poorly. Sometimes you exemplify it well, and it's not your fault. Yeah.
Okay, that's weird, because I feel like this specific argument.
So I think. Finish your sentence so I don't interrupt you.
Well, this specific, I probably know where I'm going, so it's
do.
fine. But this specific argument seems to counter that.
Sure, I think it adds. I think it just adds perspective, because you would agree that there are bad fathers.
Yeah.
Yeah. Even if there are good ones, that there are bad ones.
Yes.
Here, I think the context of knowing. I think this is where a little bit of the historical, like, how does that word hit in Athenian? Can help a little bit. If you know the apology, it really helps. To learn justice from the many is kind of a euphemism for mob mentality.
Okay.
It's a little bit, because Socrates' argument is, okay, well, let's examine. Are they fit teachers of the Greek language? What are our requirements for a teacher?
Right, and since
do they all know the Greek language?
Yes.
Do they all agree?
No.
On the Greek language? On which word refers to which object?
No, but they said that it doesn't. He said they don't agree on like finitude of the Greek language, and that's why they're not good.
I was pretty sure he said they were fine teachers of the Greek language.
Okay. I'll
Maybe
skim.
I forget.
I'll skim, but what is your point then?
His point is they might be fitting teachers of the Greek language.
Right.
Okay. Do they all know justice? Well, they certainly all claim to, and I can't read their minds. Do they all agree?
Probably not.
No, he says nothing is more hotly debated at all times than the just. And he says, well, then the many aren't qualified teachers of justice because they do not have consensus. That's one of the reasons he builds the consensus. Plato's putting the consensus thing in the beginning. I'm going to say Plato wrote this. I'm just going to be really upfront. I think Plato wrote this. I also don't care if he didn't. And even if he didn't, I'm just going to say Plato's the author because it's easier than saying the author says.
Right.
Say Plato. Anyway, Plato is putting this knowledge and consensus thing at the beginning so that later Socrates
Yeah,
can
he can
say, well,
reference it.
we've already talked about this. Do the many agree on justice? And of course, the obvious answer that everyone says is no. Nothing is more hotly debated than politics.
Right.
Which is
He also calls
the
out
business of
politicians
justice.
later. I love it.
He does. He calls out a lot of people regularly. That's kind of why they killed him. But
Yeah.
that's one of the things. So when we see, like, I like that you gave pushback. That's the other thing I love about Plato. Plato wants pushback. Plato wants the dialogue. There's a reason Plato doesn't write a treatise like Aristotle. Plato specifically says in one of the dialogues, writing is a crutch because you can't question a text and get a response. You can't have a conversation with a text.
Right.
Aristotle will expand on this, and he says, the good is only found when two human minds meet and strike against each other, thereby causing the spark. And so there's a sense in which, like, it's good to have pushback on Plato, to say, Socrates, I think you left something out. Or, Socrates, I don't think that argument works. There's a few arguments in here where I would say, Socrates, you're pushing it.
Yeah.
You really are stretching your leading questions, and you are leaving things out. And it's fine because, for whatever reason, you're leading us down a certain path for a certain reason. Fine. But it is, I think Plato wants you to say, yeah, but I have questions. And Plato would say, good. Whatever you do, don't stop having those. And then he wants this. He wants exactly what we're doing. We've both read this, and we are saying, Socrates, I don't know about this page. Yeah. And then we chit-chat and say, oh, he's got a point on the one hand. But you're right. The forms are so important. This is actually one of the reasons people are like, Plato didn't write this, because it's not formy enough for them. Whatever.
No, mob mentality, I didn't know that was...
It's a little bit, only because we as good, quote-unquote, good Plato scholars, we know the apology so well that in our ears, whenever we hear the many will judge, we're like, oh, shoot, they kill Socrates because they get it wrong.
Yeah,
and Socrates says they couldn't not get it wrong. They are the many. The many cannot know justice because justice is not anonymous. Things like that. That's what's running through my head as someone who's read Plato.
Yeah. I mean, the other thing I would have thought of is like society, which is kind of the same.
Society would not have been a positive term.
No, I mean, it's not now. Like,
sure.
We live in a society.
We live in a society.
Exactly. I'm just a gamer.
What do you get when you cross?
Yeah. Oh, good movie. I know, and then they talk about what is they talk about what is good. I had another note. Oh man.
Put your phone on D&D right now.
I thought I had it on Do Not Disturb. Didn't. That's fine. No, so the next thing they talk about is why would you be able to lead? No, they talk about honor, and that's okay.
They talk about honor because what he's trying to lead Alcibiades to say, all justice is good. There is no justice. There's no way to act. There's no way to act well, to act for the good, and to act unjustly. That's where he's going with honor.
Which makes sense.
Yes, that's where he wants to get with that.
That's a good. Yep. I like that. No, just like some of his questions about honor, I just don't understand. But
that could be a cultural thing.
Okay, because like
I think it's very culturally sensitive.
He says stuff like, "Is it evil to kill yourself or like to sacrifice yourself to save another?" I was like, "Is it though?" Like, or no, he doesn't say that. He says it is. They like agree that it's evil because you die. I was like, I mean,
yes,
kind of.
Yeah.
Like
Socrates plays a lot of just go with me on this one.
Yeah,
and let me make my point.
He does.
You're right. There's another spot where there's good pushback to say, on the one hand, you're right. A human being dying is not a good thing. We're there. On the other hand, and also we have a different perspective. These are Greek pagans.
Yeah, we are Christian.
Know some
USA
things.
Christian.
Yeah. I'm
raised.
Orthodox over here, and I'm going. Man has no greater love than to lay down his life.
Right, exactly.
And so,
no, I have another note, and I don't know why I put this note in here. I'm going to be honest.
That's fine. I also found a note that I was like, Mike, what were you doing? And wrote like a follow-up note to it while I was reading this.
It's about what. So you want the people who are the most confident to have power in a society.
Confident or competent?
Competent.
Competent.
Sorry.
Okay, good.
I wrote confident, cross it out, and put competent on there.
I love that.
Because I was confident. It's dumb.
No.
Competent. Because there's a reason you want somebody that you can get behind and who can actually lead to be the leader. And they talk about it when they talk about the kings a little bit later.
Yeah, they'll talk later in the next one that we'll read, Lysis. They will go on a long thing where they are basically like, the only people who should be allowed to do the important things are those that know how to do them.
Right.
We'll go, yeah, that's a conversation we'll have with Lysis.
Okay. We'll get into that later. I don't know why I had that note there. I'm going to be honest. Because it's in the middle of them talking about honor, which has nothing to do with people being competent. That's later in the text.
It's interesting that you did put it there. I'd be interested next time you read that. Like,
I'll probably reread it sometime. I was pretty tired doing this.
Yeah, when you reread it, when you do reread it, because
it's gonna happen.
That's the whole thing with Plato is you need to keep having these conversations with him and with others. Yeah, just sometimes I go back and I say a note and I'm just like, yeah, I don't know where I was then. It doesn't make any sense to me now. I have grown since then. Sometimes I go back and go, oh, that is interesting how I thought that a year and a half ago. Yes, yeah, they talk about the Persians. So how do they get into the talk about the Persians? Just to get us there.
He talks about why you? What you? Because he's like, Alcibiades, what are you? Why? And he's like, well, people are not confident enough that I can just walk in. I'm already better than everybody here.
Already better than everyone there.
And then he's like, okay,
and
but
Socrates,
are they your?
And Socrates says you're right.
Yeah,
you really actually are.
Yeah, and then he's like, okay, but are they the people you should be competing against? Right. I'm like, I mean, yeah, like
on the one hand,
kind of,
but then Socrates is getting. We're gonna keep it. One of the biggest questions in this dialogue is, who is your enemy?
Yes,
and we'll get to that. But yeah, he's like, it's beneath you to compete with them. Also,
yeah, because you're already better. Well, one, you're already better than them, and
you're already better than them, and two, what if you beat them? What happens?
Nothing. Exactly.
The bigger enemy. Like,
there's always a bigger fish.
There's always a bigger fish. There's always something beyond your puny little idea of what the next challenge is. The picture is so much bigger.
Right, and he talks about when you're sailing a ship, you're trying to be better than everybody on your boat and be the best shipman on the boat, because the best shipman or the best sailor to be captain is a good thing. Like, yes. I'm not just saying it's not a bad thing, but he's like, okay, but then what about the other captains that you're fighting against? You got to be better than them too to win. Yep. Right. So on one hand, you have to be better than everybody else so that they can rally behind you. On the other hand, you also have to be better. Like, he also kind of goes back and forth on it. I will say, because he does say, like, is your enemy the people are the other kings? Yeah, but are they? No.
And we're going to keep expanding. That's one of the things is, like, he's going to get him all riled up about the kings of other countries. And then he's going to say, even they're nothing.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. He's like,
for those of you, just real quick, for those of you who read the Apology, I don't want to get into this right now. For those of you who have read the Apology, it's worth noting Socrates spends a lot of time basically saying, Athens isn't your enemy. Athens is on your side. And everyone who's read the Apology, just sit with that for 2 seconds while we move on. But yeah, so he goes to the king of Persia, which is, he epitomizes earthly.
Oh yeah, he has like a 2-page.
Yeah, earthly enemy of the Greeks. Persia represents, if you're familiar with Old Testament, Israel, Babylon, Greece, Persia.
300, like.
Yeah, Greece, Persia. Like,
yeah, exactly.
That's the same thing. Persia isn't just Persia. Persia is the all of. We started the whole dialogue saying, Alcibiades, nothing will satisfy you except for world domination. Persia represents everything that is opposed to Greece.
Well, it's kind of like Nazis.
Yes. Or the
communists. Communists like, is what much better.
That's what the Persians are. The Persians are the everything that's opposed to what we stand for.
Right.
Gets the Persians. That's what they represent. So yeah, And I love the description he gives of the Persian prince's upbringing, and then he's like, Alcibiades, how do you measure up? And Alcibiades is like,
I got this guy in a shag is pretty cool.
Yeah, exactly.
That taught me. Well, I think it's also funny. He's like, Alcibiades, who are you descended from? And he's like, oh, like this god. And he's like, yeah, so the Persians, but they're better than you because they're the kings.
Yeah, you aren't better than them because of your divine lineage.
No.
You're equal with them on that. So what are you
No,
better
he
at
says
them
they're
then?
like worse. He's worse because his dad is like just a nobody.
That's true. He says that if by lineage, eventually you can get up to the gods, but your more immediate lineage, you're already worse.
Yeah, that one he's like, well, yeah, your dad is just, but then he's just like, dude,
Because his uncle's really cool.
yeah.
His uncle's awesome. His uncle is the guy whose name is escaping me right now, and that is embarrassing. Pericles, yes. His uncle's Pericles, but his dad is literally like whatever. But yeah, he basically says, Alcibiades, you are inferior. Basically, he looks at Alcibiades and says, what are all the things that you value? What are all the best qualities of a man?
Right.
And Alcibiades lists a bunch of things, and Socrates goes one by one and says, well, the Persian king's better at you than in that and that. Like,
yeah, and
goes
he's like,
list
dude,
and just
if I
says,
was...
you do realize you're worse than your main enemy? You're worse than him in every single way.
Right, and then the other thing...
Embarrassingly bad. To
To
the point where the foreign king's mother will worry about your sanity and safety when she finds out you challenge her son. Like, you're an embarrassment.
Yes, that one I'm like, I thought that was pretty funny.
Not only are you worse, you're not even a threat.
Yes. And then they get into a little bit.
I want to talk about that a little bit more.
Oh,
I just want to
sorry.
mention something. The 4 things that are really brought up as the principal education of the prince:
Justice,
fortitude, wisdom, and prudence.
Okay. Yeah. Those are pretty.
It's the
those are
4
pretty
cardinal
good.
virtues.
Yeah. Those
The
are
4
pretty
cardinal
good.
virtues. At some point worth us chit chatting about those
For sure.
At some point, but it's the natural virtues. It's the human perfections.
Courage was an interesting one in this dialogue.
Yes, fortitude and courage being the same thing, and we'll talk about courage actually a little bit more in the
Yeah.
keys.
I just want to mention because it's not courage; it's fearlessness in this.
Do you want to know the real?
Yeah. There's a Greek word.
Manness.
Okay.
Manness, courage. Now he equates it with fearlessness.
Yes, that's what
Later
I'm like.
in the lackeys,
Okay.
we will the lackeys is how to be a man. It's on Andrea.
Okay.
Courage. So we'll talk about that
Cool.
in the lackeys more. But yes, I just wanted to say cardinal virtues show up. We're pumping the cardinal virtues real quick, and then we move on to whatever else you want to talk about. 'Cause I don't think this is that I like to get bogged down in the cardinal virtues.
Moving on to the next little point that they made, they talk about then like, okay, so what do you got to do now? What does it mean? What do you want to do? And he says to be like the kind of pilot of Athens.
Yes.
Which we can get into that later. There's a really good sea shanty about.
Excellent.
It's about when you die, the pilot you want to meet is God, which Socrates mentions in this, which I think is interesting.
He's going to talk about Hotheos, the god.
Right.
And that's worth chit-chatting briefly about.
Yeah, it's just interesting because he's like,
More
okay,
important to the Euthyphro and the Apology.
who do you learn this from? And he's like, well, this guy Pericles. And he's like, well, who do you learn from? Because you seem like your guy is better. And he's like, God.
Yeah. The fullness of truth, goodness, and beauty. Yeah.
Yeah, like it's intense.
I have found the best teacher. I learn only from the best. Like I despise the opinions of others. I will tolerate no inferior teacher. Yeah, it's very, very strong wording. This is another reason they think Plato didn't write it, but that's fine. It's because Socrates claims to be good at something, and that's always like, oh, Socrates never claims it. And it's like, well, never is a strong word. But yes. He claims to have the best teacher, or he claims to only care about the best teacher. He claims that the best teacher is available to pretty much anyone, basically. But yeah,
No, and it's getting like that. They just kind of talk about like what it is to be a good person. So what would it be or how would he achieve them best? And that's because that's what they talk about, Mike. I don't really
Yes.
kind of have anything prepared for that part.
Yes. So I think what's more important for the end of this one, because I think we'll spend lots of time talking about like the mechanisms of virtue.
Right.
At the end, he describes God as a mirror. It's like right at the very end. He says, when you look into the mirror, you will see yourself as you truly are. And
he does. Yeah. Okay.
That's so gnotha septon, know thyself.
Yes.
He like specifically. Another reason I don't think Plato wrote this because he specifically says the oracle says blah blah blah, and Plato's always a little like touch and go with quoting the oracle, except in the Apology. But whatever. He says the first maxim: know thyself.
Yes.
Do you do it? And this whole dialogue, when Socrates asked that question, we should look back at the whole dialogue and say Alcibiades hasn't the foggiest.
No, I think that's
how
the thesis.
He measures up with anyone else, let alone the measure. This all the good, the God. He like not only does he not, he does know how he measures up to the Athenians. We'll hand him that. He's better than all of them. But he doesn't understand that like that's not worth much.
No, it's only worth as much as
it's only worth as much
when
as the
you're
Athenians are, which
apparently
Socrates
is nothing.
Not compared to Persia or Sparta or any of these other places that are better than them. And so he doesn't really know himself, and he doesn't realize that he doesn't know what justice is. He doesn't realize that he's not competent to talk about war. He doesn't realize that he has had bad teachers his whole life. He doesn't know anything about himself. He's wrong about everything. And it's not that he's wrong about every individual thing. He's wrong about everything.
Yeah, like the most important things.
Yeah. He's wrong about the whole system of reality.
Yes.
He's got it backwards. He's got it misshapen and misconformed in his mind. And so that's where at the very end, this passage called the Divine Mirror is to, if you want to know yourself, you have to be able to measure. You have to be able to compare yourself to something.
Right.
And the only thing worth comparing to is the unchanging standard. If I want to measure this table, I could just say it's however many times long as any random object in my house, but that's not as helpful as just having inches. Having a standard that never changes. I can communicate that. So I can say this table is like 18 times the length of my favorite book. That doesn't
What does that mean? Yeah, exactly.
Anything to anyone else. Even if I think it means a lot to me. But if there is a standard,
you can communicate.
You can communicate it, and you can be honest with yourself about it. You can't lie to yourself about the standard. And so he says, by the end of the dialogue, he says, we've agreed that virtue is the principal aim.
Yeah, and they say,
and of course, the Greek word virtue means excellence, perfection.
Right.
So he says that's our principal aim, and we've gotten there, and it's just worth reading the First Alcibiades to watch the argument get there. And so he says, okay, if virtue, if excellence, if perfection is the aim, then no measure will do but the God, the ultimate reality. Nothing else is worth comparing yourself to.
The perfect.
That's it. Because it's the only standard of perfection, is the only thing that's perfect.
Right. Yeah, and they talk about why. So knowing thyself is interesting because it's like you can't diagnose if you don't know that you don't know things, you can't begin to even work on anything.
You can't answer a question you don't know you should ask.
And then he talks about, before this a little bit, he talks about, well, how do I become better? And he's like, well, you have to answer questions, which I think is an interesting point. When I was first reading it, I thought that was kind of.
Sure.
But, I mean, talking a little bit now, I think I understand it a little bit more, is because when you answer questions and you open yourself up to being challenged, that's how it's not just answering questions. It's answering questions in a way that you can be critiqued and then formulate it better. So you might steer off way in the wrong direction, but it allows you to it allows somebody else to point you in a better direction or hone your knife a little bit there.
Yeah, it's not just answering questions. You can't answer questions if you aren't questioned.
Yeah.
It's being questioned in a sense. Like it's being questioned first and foremost, and then respond. Like it's going through that. And I think I like that he focuses on its answering questions. He doesn't tell you who asks them.
Yeah, and he doesn't even necessarily say be the one to ask questions. I think is kind of a given.
No, right. Is he doesn't ever say who's supposed to ask them, just that you're the one that's supposed to answer them. Because I think really we're supposed to say anyone and everyone. Like, and then principally yourself. And really principally the God should question you. You are critiqued by a standard. And it's the others around you, society, the many. The close, which we'll talk about at some other point, the close, those who know you well. Yourself, can you self-reflect? Can you critique your own thoughts honestly? Can you prove yourself wrong and grow from it without another person necessary? That's an intensely difficult skill to develop. And then really, can you open yourself to critique from the almighty perfect?
Yeah. And then I only had one other issue with this text.
Cool. I don't have a lot more to talk about. I think we've covered most of the things I'm most interested in.
Yeah, we're kind of wrapping up here, but I want to bring this up one time. Okay. He says there are only 3 ways a man can exist. Body, soul, and a combination of the two. And they settle on a true human is just his soul.
Yes, Plato.
And I don't know about that.
Yep, I disagree. I think Aristotle's right.
Okay.
I think body and soul composite. Yes, Plato is fundamentally sure that your soul is you and your body is a meat prison.
Yeah, and that's where I'm just like, I don't know about that.
Yep.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure I wasn't the only one that's like,
nope.
Okay,
yeah, that is something that I think Aristotle, now Socrates, Plato's got his arguments and his points.
No, the points are good because your soul shouldn't be subservient to like the urges of your body, and like I can get that.
Yeah, what he's doing in a sense is penduluming. Think about the Greek afterlife. What do they call ghosts?
I don't know.
Shades,
okay.
Shadows, figments. You know when Odysseus goes down to the underworld in the Odyssey and he talks to Achilles. And he says, "You must be like a god down here. So great was your honor in life." And Achilles says, "Being dead is nothing. I am nothing.
I don't remember
I'm
this.
not even myself. I would rather be living the servant of the lowest shepherd than king of all the dead, because to be a shade means you are nothing." And he can't touch them. They're not material. Like the typical Greek view of a person is you are a body.
Right.
And your shade, your soul is this ephemeral shadow, nothing. Like the afterlife sucks because you aren't really you. You don't really exist. You're like less. Socrates and Plato pendulum.
The other way.
They swing real hard. Like, no, you don't realize your soul is so wildly more important than your body. Like, your soul is really you. And it's more proper to say your soul is you and your body is this other thing. And then Aristotle, I think, then has the unique opportunity to say, I didn't have to pendulum because someone else did it for me. I can now look at the two sides and say, look, you're both getting at something. And it's because you really are both. And Plato has made the strong argument one way, and everyone knows the strong argument the other. And Aristotle then just in a position that Plato wasn't in to make the connection, the synthesis of the two.
Okay.
So in a sense, there are things Plato is wrong about that I'm more critical of Plato being wrong about them. The body soul thing, I'm like, I kind of get it. I kind of get why he words it so strongly one direction. Now, his doctrine of anamnesis, we can talk all about.
We'll get to that one day. We're at an hour of content, so I think we'll be okay.
Excellent. And only 30 minutes of it was banter.
We did meander quite a bit.
I actually thought we stayed pretty on topic.
I think so, but I'm just saying this wasn't like an academic.
No, and you know what? I think that's better.
Yeah, I think it's fine.
I think Plato is better understood outside of not a dry lecture. You shouldn't lecture on Plato. I don't like lectures on Plato. I like conversations with Plato. You got to fight him.
Yeah.
And you can't fight a lecturer. They
No,
have too
not
much
really.
power.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's not set up to, so.
Exactly. A lecture's whole purpose is that you can't fight the person. They just impart knowledge.
Yeah.
But I think Plato, you have to fight Plato. He was a wrestler, after all.
He was.
And he wants you to wrestle with him. He doesn't give you answers. Makes you work for it.
Well, that's all we got. Kind of wrap it up here. So until next time. Well, what's the homework for next time?
The Lysis, Lysis.
Read the Lysis.
Lysis, about friendship. And just
It's Greek.
just understand that it's a bunch of Greeks. And
Yeah.
and they're going to say things. And I can do what I can to maybe help put it in context. And be like, you're right. All the weirdness that happens. But, like, can you read it without letting the weirdness get in the way of what Plato's trying to communicate?
All right. Until next time, everybody, I want to wish you fair winds and following sea.